Are we all ready? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those who don't know me, my name is Terry, and I have been given the dubious honour of being Paul's best man today. I'm not sure if I'm actually the best man, but knowing most of Paul's other friends, I'm probably just the best of a bad bunch. Anyway, a while back, Paul asked me what I thought about marriage. I said I was flattered, but what about Emma? I've been looking forward to this day since around July last year, which was when Paul emailed me asking me if I would be his best man. This was just 24 hours after Emma had replied to his tweet saying yes, she would marry him. When researching speeches on the internet, I discovered that it's customary for the best man speech to contain a history lesson involving a major event that took place on the day of the wedding. Although not that major an event, I did find it amusing that on this day, back in 1969, Sesame Street made its debut on American TV. And here we are, 43 years later, talking about another Muppet. Paul's asked me today to refrain from mentioning any ex-girlfriends in this speech, and that sadly cut it down by about a good 3 seconds. Paul and Emma met through work, and I remember a lot of nights out over a long period where Paul would drag me all around town just so he could meet up with his work friends. There seemed to be this one work friend that was always there all the time, and Paul clearly had a thing for them. He stared into their eyes and was quite often caught dribbling. Unfortunately, Adam left JP Morgan and Paul was left heartbroken. In all seriousness, Paul was trying to get with Emma for a long time. I don't think I've heard the word no so much in all my life. But gradually he wore her down and must have caught her off guard. Paul always used to have a saying, if all else fails, persistence prevails. And it looks like it's paid off today, as here we are. Emma tells me the first time she saw Paul, she thought he was quite handsome from afar. Now she thinks he's far from handsome. On behalf of all the bridesmaids today, I would like to thank the groom for his kind comments. They are indeed very well turned out and have done a marvellous job of standing around looking nice and not doing much. However, I would also like to warn him that this is the last time he will get away with complimenting other women in the presence of his new wife. Now today is a very sad day for all single men around. There's another good-looking girl, our Emma here, is unfortunately off the market. And all the ladies here, I'm sure you will agree that today has passed by without much of a ripple. There's more. I first met Paul while watching AFC Bournemouth, and he's been hanging around like a bad smell ever since. I can remember him, and my first impressions of him, I thought he was gormless, hyperactive, challenging, annoying, badly dressed and loud. As you all know, not much has changed. Paul then started to hang around with us more often, probably as he had nothing better to do. Then despite being a Scottish national, and much to his dad's disgust, he started coming along to watch England games with us. This led to Paul not only annoying everyone else in England, but also annoying everyone else around the world too. Me and Paul have had some great times all around the world and the country, and we've visited the right backward places, including Belarus, Lithuania, Ukraine, and Southampton. Paul's actually given me a list today of the things I can't mention in the speech, and I've got it here with me now. So that brings me on to only a few stories that I can say about Paul without being prosecuted. The first one was one of Paul's first England adventures. England were playing in Copenhagen in Denmark. And the usual antics were there, everyone getting semen, etc. And on the last night, after the match, it got a bit out of hand as usual, and everyone was a little bit tipsy, shall we say. And Paul had an earlier flight than the rest of us, and his alarm woke us up in the hotel. Paul was still hammered, however, and he didn't hear the alarm. Me and a few others tried to get him up and out, which was difficult as we were quite drunk ourselves. But we eventually managed to get him up, packed his bag for him, and literally pushed him out of the hotel room door. We had a few hours to kill in Denmark, and Paul had planned to wait for us back at Heathrow as I had driven to the airport. The first problem arrived when leaving the room later on. We found Paul's phone on the floor. We hadn't heard from him, but assumed he would be waiting for us at Heathrow. He wasn't. It turned out that he got about 5 metres from the door without our assistance, and had been found asleep in the elevator at the hotel by the staff, and had actually missed his flight home.
Lift.
Which brings me on to my next story about Paul. Me and Paul and a few others had been out drinking in the local boozer, the Molten Hops in Sowle. And we were on the way back to Paul's flat for some more drinks, and we thought we'd stop at the Chinese. Paul, being the greedy bastard that he is, ordered a whole host of greasy treats, and the smile on his face when they handed it over was as happy as I've ever seen him, including today. Then walking out the door, this scouser appeared from nowhere, punched Paul in the face, and ran off with his Chinese. And now to my favourite story about Paul. You ready? Me and Paul had been out drinking in town one weekend. Paul was living back at his mum's in Blandford, and I was living at my parents' in Southbourne. So Paul quite often invited himself round to stay for the weekend. We got back to my parents pretty drunk, and the next thing I know, my dad was shaking me, trying to wake me up. Paul had tried to get into bed with my mum and dad, and was currently asleep on their bedroom floor. And could I please remove him? Now to the stag do. There was 35 morons, was it for? There's about 35 morons in Poland basically, and not much happened, but Paul's actually written this bit himself, and he said he wanted to make sure that I didn't say anything too bad in front of all his friends and family. So Paul said, "We had a great time in Poland, we saw some great buildings and learned about the war, and one night we had a couple of pints." The end. Paul's also said that for all the lads on the stag do, he's going to get a round of Jaeger bombs in, so please see him at the bar later. Cheers, Paul. And for those who wasn't there, there's a picture of Paul from his stag do, which Sarah's going to hold up for me. Thank you, Sarah. As some of you might know, Paul and Emma have just bought a house, and I hope they live happily ever after. But Paul did tell me they need some DIY work, as Paul assured me that after today, himself and Emma will be banging and screwing at every opportunity. Now, I'd like to share some words of wisdom that I found on the internet while researching this speech. Paul and Emma, never go to bed on an argument, always stay up and argue. Number 2, the best way to remember your anniversary is to forget it once. Number 3, Paul, always remember these 3 little words, "You're right, dear." Number 4, in times of trouble, remember these helpful words from Oscar Wilde, "Women are meant to be loved, not understood." I'd like to ask that all the couples here today, can you please now turn and look into one another's eyes and stare deeply. Now stats say that you are now staring at the person most likely to murder you. Paul, you will leave here today having gained a lovely wife who's funny, caring and great to be around. And Emma, you will leave here today having gained a lovely new dress and some nice flowers. I've got some messages to read out now from various people. Dear Emma, Don't do it, anonymous. Dear Emma, what are you doing, anonymous? Dear Emma, are you serious, anonymous? And a serious one now. A message from Boston, the place in America, not Lincolnshire. I've known Paul and Ems for basically the same amount of time. Two fantastic, genuine and lovely people. But the difference between them is Emma is nice to look at and doesn't smell of tenant super. Well, during the week, anyway. Joking aside, I'm delighted for you guys. Emma is the brains and the beauty of you. Paul is just, well, Paul is Paul, and would have it no other way. Have an amazing day and future together. You deserve it, finally. I've arranged for Superfletch to make a guest appearance in his gimp mask later. Don't say I don't ever do anything for you, McCann. With love from across the pond, from Nick, Vicky and Dylan Miles. And I've got a card here from Geordie John, who is at the back, I believe. John, can you make yourself known? John? John? I'm not sure why he was reading out to his hair anyway. Anyway, I'll read it out. Who would have thought 6 years ago, when I was walking around a German campsite in my slippers, I would end up at a Scotsman wedding who follows England just 5 months after his beautiful new wife were at mine and my wonderful wife's special day. Thanks for the friendship, Geordie, John and Vicky. And we're getting near the end now, you'll be pleased to know. But Paul and Emma have asked me to thank you all for your gifts today and explain the seating arrangements. There is a method to where you're all seated, and the people that are given the best gifts are at the front. So mentioning no names, but Andrew Fry at the back, thanks for the Jimmy Savile t-shirts. And finally, in all seriousness, I spent many a happy hour all over the world with Paul. All the good times and stories have been endless, and I was honoured when he asked me to be his best man today. And in Emma, he has found someone very special, and I wish them both every happiness. I hope everyone's enjoyed the day so far. The service was amazing, and the singer was especially good. There's more to come, and the Butcher Blues will be playing later, which I'm sure you'll all enjoy, and I'm personally looking forward to the buffet. I want to say a massive thank yous for everyone who has contributed and made this day so wonderful, not least myself. So it gives me great pleasure, not to mention great relief, to ask you all to stand and to raise your glasses to love and to laughter and a happy ever after. Paul and Emma. And I'd like to pass on to, I've got a round of applause, please, come on. And a special guest speech we've got from Sarah, who's the maid of honour today, who would like to say a few words. So she'll pass the mic to her.
Thank you, Terry.